and I think consistently making things sort of naturally evolves your aesthetic, because every so often you'll like change one thing, and a little thing here and there over time really leads to an eventual sort of large evolution in your work.
Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Art Journey Podcast, the podcast where we explore other artists' journeys and popular topics in art to help you on your own journey. I'm your host, Alex Agosto, and hi, guys. Oh my gosh, I've had an interesting few weeks. So, okay, I'm going to be real with you guys. I've not been super consistent with a podcast, and I know I don't have to tell you that. By the way, if you hear what sounds to be a parrot screaming in the background, that's my bird Bowser in the other room. But anyways, I know I have not been that consistent. I've been trying my best to upload, close to once a week if I can, but I think this is something many of you part-time artists can relate to. I'm having a tough time balancing my full-time day job and being an artist on the side. And, it's really hard and it's really draining, and there's just some days where I feel like I can't do it all. And it's been really getting me down lately. And unfortunately, that's why I have had to take it easy with the podcast. I edit episodes when I can, and I record these intros and outros also when I have time and energy. But I feel like it's very important to tell you guys this, because I know that I look like this very bubbly, super cheerful person, but I go through the same struggles you do, and I want you to know that you're not alone in feeling like you can't balance your day job and your own personal work. You're not the only one who feels like that, I feel it. Many of our guests have said that they've felt that as well, and I just want you to know that it's okay to take time to yourself. When you're working on your own personal work, the beauty of it is you can go at your own pace. So that being said, I'm going to try to post episodes weekly. I always try that, but it just might not always be on the same day of the week. But enough about me. So today's guest is really cool. She does the cutest art in the world. Heck, her brand name has the word cheerful in it. And when you look at her art, it really does make you feel cheerful. Her name is Kristina Yu from Cheery Human Studios. And oh my gosh, if you haven't seen her work, you better check it out. She really plays a lot with texture and very cute imagery and positive, uplifting messaging. And she has a really, really cool story to tell that shows that you can transition from being in a very corporate environment to working for yourself and producing your own brand. And you know what? Enough about me telling you about her. Let her tell you about her. Without any further ado, guys, this is Kristina Yu from Cheery Human Studios. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, really, really well, trying to recover still from the craziness of the holidays. I mean, I'm still in the midst, but I'm about to put my shop on vacation tomorrow, or I guess at the end of today. So yeah, I'm still recovering from that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you so much for taking time out, because I imagine this time of year must be super crazy for you.
Oh yeah, it's insane. I mean, I'm so thankful for, for the fact that, people come and support my small shop and everything, but it definitely is insane with like shows and, online sales and then marketing on Instagram and all of that business. It's crazy, but I really wouldn't have it any other way.
Totally, I totally get what you're saying. So, with everyone, I like to go like way, way back to the beginning
Mhm.
of when you were a kid. Were you a kid that was interested in art?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think my earliest memory, like once you mentioned like me as a kid and like going way way back, one of the first memories I have is just is having like this crayon box that was like my favorite thing in the entire world, and it wasn't even the official crayon box. It was just like this red box that I had found or put together, and I collected all my crayons, and they all like kind of lived in that box. And I remember being obsessed with stickers and organizing my stickers and collecting all of those different like sort of art styles now that I think back on it.
Yeah.
And then and at school, like writing really short stories and drawing whatever I thought made the most sense for that story at the time and like having it posted up on the board. So like I feel like art's been a part of my life for a really long time.
Yeah, that seems to be the case with most of the artists that I have on. I feel like it's very rare to find an artist who didn't at least have some interest in it as a kid.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I've definitely like that's the case with a lot of the artists that I've spoken to as well, and people that I've met in the industry is that, we kind of started out coloring and coloring books and loving children's books and loving the art and all of that work, and then growing up and having to be able to do all of this for our work ourselves is just sort of amazing.
Yeah. And so transitioning from like kid to like growing up,
Mhm.
when would you say was when you decided, you know what, I could do this for a living. I should start taking this seriously.
To be honest, it wasn't really until late in life.
Really?
Not really late, but I non-traditionally, I didn't really go to school for art. So when I was growing up, I had all of these influences. I loved art and I loved taking art classes. But I also loved doing music. And so for a while through high school and towards the end of middle school, I guess, a lot of my ambitions involved potentially working in music at some point.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I was interested in all of that stuff, and I did really well in school, and so it was always that sort of conflict between like, should I go the artist musician route or should I do, something more, I guess, I don't know what's a better word for it, but like practical, I guess,
Mhm.
quote unquote practical. Um, and then when I went to college, I was still a little conflicted, and I wasn't even sure what I was going to do. So to sort of pacify all of the expectations that were on me at the time, I think I took business marketing because I was like, okay, I can pass this and do, some graphic design classes when I wanted to, and I could do art
Yeah.
classes and I could do music if I wanted to also, but I would also get that business background. And so whatever it was that I decided to choose at the end to do at the end of it, business would always be something that I had sort of as a baseline, I guess. So it wasn't until really I was maybe 24, 25 that I decided, whatever I was doing at the time, I was doing a lot of like temp admin work.
Mhm.
Um, it wasn't it wasn't really fulfilling for me, and I
Yeah.
knew that I really wanted to do something more creative, but again, I wasn't sure what. And at the time, I was like, okay, well, I guess I can go into graphic design. I didn't know what to call it. I had no idea, what to pick. And
Mhm.
graphic design was the only thing that I thought logically, made sense as far as going back to school and finding a major. And so I took some classes at a local community college and really enjoyed graphic design and the work that it involved. And then I applied to grad school, and then I
Wow.
decided to move to the Bay Area, and like the program that I decided to do was web design new media, which again at the time like it was sort of at the beginning of all the UI UX boom
Yeah.
craziness, um, and again I had no idea what to expect. But I sort of pushed myself in it all the way. I kind of, instead of like dipping my toes in, I just kind of jumped in all the way.
Yes, it definitely sounds like that.
Yeah, and and then I worked like crazy for different agencies and companies in the Bay Area, and so for a while, like I actually worked in tech and did design in tech, so completely different from what I'm
Wow.
doing now.
Yeah. So like it sounds like your career in general has been like kind of back and forth between a lot of things.
Yeah, I would say so for sure.
So so I know that you did the admin work and then you kind of went to school for graphic design and then you went to grad school for it. What was your first job in the creative field?
So while I was doing the master's program for I think it was called Web Design New Media.
Mhm.
Um, that first year, all I kept saying to myself was, you got to get a job in this because you have to pay off the loan afterwards. You got to figure it out. And at that first year, I must have done like 3 or 4 different internships,
Oh wow.
and yeah, it was insane. It was probably like, and I feel like a lot of artists will 100% relate to this. It's just you just don't sleep much in school.
It's so true.
You're like trying to work and earn money, and then trying to work and get like cool projects, and then you're trying to like do well in school. Um and
Totally.
so I just there was an agency that I worked for, a studio that I worked for, and then a company um called Take a Fly that I interned for as well. And I decided to go, and both offered me full-time positions like after my first year of school.
That's awesome.
And so I dropped school and and I decided to just hit the ground running and go for the full-time studio position, because I thought, well, if this is what I was going to try and do anyway, maybe I'll learn a lot from just working in the industry itself.
Mhm.
Um,
Definitely.
so that's what I did, and so I didn't end up finishing grad school, but I did start, working with a ton after that, and I worked this started the studio life for 3 years after that with them.
Yeah, that's amazing. I always tell artists that go to school that
Yeah,
it's really that if you have the opportunity, just maybe just try an internship,
yeah,
especially when it's not required, because a
hmm
lot of people they'll just they just won't do it. If it's not required, they're like, I'm not gonna spend my time on that. But it can
uh-huh.
open so many doors for you.
Oh yeah, I would highly recommend that. I mean, that was one thing that I kind of, I guess, when I started art school, was in the back of my head thinking, you know, you learn so much more from interacting with people in the industry that are actually working in the industry, and um and with clients as well, like real life clients, than sitting in a classroom and getting feedback from your teacher. Because as great as that is, with learning like the basics and everything, the foundation and all of that stuff is really important. But I think living in that sort of environment and like working in that environment is such a huge like learning experience.
They provide the value of real life experience
Hmm.
with minimized stress
Oh
because
yeah.
they know that you're not a full-fledged professional, so you're more open to making mistakes because they know that that's what you're there for. They know you're going to make your mistakes, you don't know everything, and it's like basically having a real job without the pressure.
Oh, absolutely. And there's, and they have, for the most part, in the internships that I've had, they always want you to succeed. And so even if you put your best foot forward, if you show them what you got really, then, you never know. You could get a position offer at the end of it. You really never know.
Yeah, and especially they start to get to know you as a person, and
Hmm.
even if you don't get a position at the internships that you work at, a lot of times those people know people who need new employees.
Definitely.
So, it always pays off even if it's unpaid, which I know a lot of places in the US don't have they don't offer unpaid internships because yes, there are some ethics involved,
Oh yeah.
but, like if you can go and do an unpaid internship, but it's for school, I totally, totally recommend it because I did an internship in school and I got experience that has opened doors even now, 3, 4 years after I graduated.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean the whole unpaid internship thing is it's really hard to get over, especially as a starving college student.
Yes, it is
But if
very
it's
hard.
yeah, but if it's one thing where, if they are going to give you school credit, if you can guarantee they do, I don't know, like recommend you for some other position or some
Mhm.
part-time position, or because sometimes that'll happen too where, you could try and like negotiate something at some point and say, hey, like, I know it's unpaid, but what if I got like a recommendation letter afterwards? Or do you know someone that could potentially hire me for a part time position afterwards? And you could build your portfolio as well. So there's a lot of, it's obviously it depends on what your goals are, but I think getting getting that sort of experience is extremely valuable in the long run.
Totally, totally agree. And so, I guess after the excitement of like having your internships and then finally landing this job, did you enjoy the job that you got out of it?
So for a while, I did. I would say that working in tech was something that I never projected in my life. Like I never thought that I would work in tech. When I started out, I started in graphic design, and I thought, I really want to design really beautiful um, packaging and like marketing, and I didn't know what the world of design had in store. Is what I think. What I'm trying to say is,
Mhm.
when I went into it, the whole digital mobile app, web app design thing was still starting up, and that was new for me, and so it was extremely exciting to be there when it all kind of started revving up and people started getting really serious about like the user experience design and user interface design and things like that. So it was great because I got to work with really talented people, and I found one of my best friends there who's still one of my best friends now. And but I started finding, towards the end that it wasn't necessarily what I think I'd envisioned for myself. Like I was working crazy hours,
Oof.
sometimes like 60 hours a week, like just not
Wow.
sleeping that much. It was pretty insane. And again, like I enjoyed it, but it was to the point where I was a little too stressed out.
Mhm. Anyone would
um,
be.
yeah, way too stressed out. And I thought at the time that that was just how it was.
Mhm.
Um, and then eventually I decided to move back home to Los Angeles, where I'm currently based out of now. And that's when I started freelancing in general.
Ooh. So
Yeah.
was this also the time where is this when you launched your own business?
No, so I came back and then I started freelancing for the same studio. And then eventually I started freelancing for a studio out here. Instead of doing more, I would say like enterprise design stuff, so like design for sort of internal systems for companies, I was doing more mobile app design, so like consumer facing products, digital products, and things like that. And then eventually, after 2.5 or 3 years, like I started getting really burned out from that, and I wanted to get back to my drawing roots. And so in 2016, or August of 2016, or a little before that, I had started sort of fumbling around in my mind with ideas of what I wanted to do, and and how I wanted to create all of this art that's sort of like I had in my brain, but didn't really know how to put on pen and on paper.
Yeah.
Um, and and then I just thought, and I've always been this kind of person. I always just thought, I thought, well, if I don't do it now, then when am I going to do it? And so and that's when I started Cheery Human in August 2016.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing. I feel like that story is you hear that a lot, where kind of the springboard to action was towards the end of doing something that you thought was good for you,
yeah,
and it ended up not being the best choice, because that happens to so many artists where you hear them say, I'm going to do the pragmatic route and
hmm
give myself a good life. And then you realize that the stress of doing that is, you could have been doing what you wanted the whole time.
oh yeah, exactly. And that's what I kept thinking too, is that, man, like as much as I'm extremely grateful for all of the work that I had done previously,
Yeah.
in like my 7 or so years in working for studios. And it got to a point where I kept thinking like, man, but what is my voice? You know?
Hmm.
Because you're working with so many clients at a time in a year that you do have your style that you've sort of figured out along the way, but at the same time you sort of I definitely lost sight of my own voice, like as the years went by, and I was yearning for that again, and I think that's why I decided to start my own thing on the side.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And your style, oh my gosh, I got introduced to your work through your friend. And when I saw your Instagram, it was just like kind of like a fresh breeze. Like
Oh, thank you.
everything is so colorful and cheerful, as your name implies. And is that kind of the style you've had all along since you started?
No. So when I started, as I said previously, I just kind of did it without without sitting down and thinking exactly how I want like things to look.
Yeah.
And I think too that I definitely don't regret that, because I think sometimes you just have to start it and then figure it out along the way. Um,
Mhm.
but when I started, all I knew was that I wanted to make things that made me happy and hopefully make other people happy as well.
Mhm.
And I knew I wanted it to be really colorful because, I worked in like enterprise tech for a while, and a
Oh
lot
my
of it was
gosh.
a lot of it was blue, gray,
Yeah.
dark gray, variations of blue, sometimes green. Like there is just
Man,
like,
they love their blues.
oh yeah, there's like there's a specific enterprise blue. So there's like
Yeah.
it's that yeah, there's that whole concept of just like, oh man, I'm looking at the same colors over and over again. I mean, that's not the case for all companies, but that's what sort of that's where I learned all my design chops.
Mhm.
Um and so when I did this, I was like, I'm just gonna go crazy because I grew up loving colors, obsessed with Rainbow Bright, and just wanting to use all of those all of the colors I possibly could in the most sane manner possible.
Yeah. No, and I feel like even with all the colors you use, it's still very cohesive. Like I feel like the colors have intention and they're not like you know how a lot of times younger artists they want to use like every color in the
Oh
rainbow
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
the sake of using every color in the
Right,
rainbow. Happens
right.
a lot to young digital artists because
Oh yeah,
they get overwhelmed by the infinite possibilities of that color wheel.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
feel like you and your color choices are very deliberate, very cohesive, even when you have like a very extensive color palette. So, I know a lot of people listening would be curious to know like how did you kind of develop your style and develop your eye for your designs, especially since like you said, a lot of your development came from a more corporate background where like you said they love their monochromes with like a pop of blue.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when I started out, it was kind of difficult, you know, when I started, I was like, okay, maybe I'll start with like these thick black lines, like outlines, and then I'll like fill it in with color. And so you'll notice that in some of my earlier designs, where, you know, like I just wanted to try something different for me because I was so used to making everything look extremely clean, and you know, one pixel, half pixel, whatever. And I just remember like going the complete opposite route, I think, when I tried it out in the first place. Um, and then I was like, okay, well, I want to do lettering, I want to do colors, and I want to do kind of fun things, and a combination of colors and of lettering and illustration, that didn't look so calculated, I think, in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to do more like vectorized. So what I do is I'd hand letter everything, and then I'd take a photo of it and do the whole deal, like put it through Illustrator and like vectorize it,
Yeah.
everything. And then eventually this year, I think towards the end of last year and this year, I thought, man, I really want to change because I don't feel like this style is a reflection
Mhm.
of me. And then I started looking back and thinking on, um, how I liked to draw things when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed crayons, and I really enjoyed colored pencil. And so I thought, well, what if I add more textures that were similar to that, like sort of nostalgic? And that's how my style has evolved now, where a lot of it is there's a combination of, you know, there's detail, but for the most part, like a lot of the textural elements are really similar to crayons. I've had people comment on that, like, it looks like you drew it with crayon. And I was like, oh,
I was noticing that texture today too. I really
yeah.
like it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it just feels more. I feel it definitely feels more authentic to where I am now. And so I'm really, that's how it evolved. Really, I just kept making stuff, and I think consistently making things, sort of naturally evolves your aesthetic, because every so often you'll like change one thing, and a little thing here and there over time really, leads to an eventual sort of large evolution in your work.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people say that where, the more you make, the closer you get to your style
Hmm.
because when you start planning too much and just thinking about it,
Hmm.
planning it isn't really going to get you closer because you need to know like what your hand can do and what you like because when you're kind of admiring other people's work, what a lot of people don't think about is that sometimes you can try your best to emulate another person's style, and
Hmm.
there's just something that that person has in them that you don't, that won't let you emulate it perfectly. And that's because that's their style and your style might just not align with it. And I was actually talking to someone yesterday who said something very interesting, that the art you like is doesn't necessarily have to be the same as the art you make.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree with that. It doesn't. That's completely true. Yeah, like a lot of the times I'll look at, I'll look at vector art, and I'll love vector art. It's just not stuff that I make. I
Yeah.
like it's nowhere near what I make, and you know, I'll like extremely minimal design, and my stuff is not minimal at all.
Yeah, and I think like you just definitely hit on that point earlier where I think that's why it's so important for you to just, make, because you
Hmm.
need to find out like that difference between what you like and what you like to make. And it's
Exactly.
very hard to figure that out if you're not consistently creating.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, when I started out, I just kept thinking like, oh man, I just want to find my style now. Like I want it now, just so I can get out the work that I know I have in me, but wasn't really sure how to.
Yeah.
And because I'm just impatient like that, so
Oh,
used to like,
I can
all of that
completely
stuff.
I can relate, and I'm sure a lot of people out there can relate.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Especially because I feel like the other thing is, you said this also, um you your style changes over time,
Hmm.
so at the end of the day you're just always working towards developing your style, and you shouldn't feel like once you find something you like that you have to stick to it, because sometimes people then get scared of changing their style because they're like, well, what if nobody likes what it changes into?
Oh yeah, and I can 100% relate to that too. I wasn't sure how my audience would react, and I didn't think that it was too big of a departure from what I had made in the past, because it was still colorful. It was still like it was still me, or I
Mm-hmm.
still felt like I was putting me into the work. But there is that part of you that worries that, what if it changes and people are confused, or people don't get it or get why you're even changing your style in the first place. But I would say to that point, if it's something that like you're never going to be 100% happy with it if you stick to something because other people want you to.
Definitely. Even your audience,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day I feel like your audience likes your work because it comes from you, not necessarily because it's consistent. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
so you have to stay true to your own voice and consistently reinforce that, and not let the outside voices influence too much, because I know sometimes people's audiences are like, this is looking really different from what you used to
Yeah.
do.
Oh
But
yeah.
it's like, it's how it is with everything. It's a loud minority.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to trust your instinct to just let your style go with the flow and let it be what it wants to be.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like what you said earlier, I think is 100% true, which is that
Art you
um
like versus art
yes, yes, art you like versus like art that you
make.
make yourself, and how important that is to recognize that.
Mhm. And so we were talking about your audience, and I know that your audience, like, they are very loyal, they're very vocal about liking your art. So how did you build that audience? I know that you do a lot of events and stuff like that. Is that kind of how you went about it?
Yeah, when I first started out, I really didn't know what I was doing. Like I said before, I kind of just jumped into it. Um, but I was learning along the way. I was definitely a combination of different things. I would say the events for sure, they're extremely important because not only do you get to I don't like saying networking, but not like build relationships with
Mhm.
other artists, but you also get to meet a lot of the people that show up online for your artwork. And
Mhm.
to me, that's been the most valuable because they build the strongest relationships, I think. And so it's definitely been events for sure. I would say also, I would say, there just so happened to be a few like social media influencers that were really into my work. And I didn't reach out to them and say, or ask them to do any promo for me at all, which was just the, I think one of the luckiest things for me. They just fell in love with my artwork and they liked me as a person, and they ended up promoting my work. And I think without me asking them, which is just a crazy blessing. And I think I would definitely attribute it to that as well, where, it was almost like, and it's been maybe around 2 years now or so. And I just feel like I never expected to, definitely didn't expect to be around like this wherever I am now on like 6K something
Mm-hmm.
followers. So yeah, I would say it's a mixture of like me pushing myself on Instagram through social media marketing, and then going to events and meeting a ton of people, and then having their friends recommend me to other friends and things like that, and meeting other artists. And then also just having social media influencers promote my work.
Yeah, isn't it funny how I feel like art is one of those careers where a lot of people have this impression that we're kind of like loners and hermits and we don't talk
Yeah.
to anyone. But I feel like you find your most success when you're social and you do go out and try to meet other people, either in your industry or people that like your work.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I do have loner tendencies. I will say that.
Oh, me too. Me too, girl.
I, I for sure have those tendencies. But when I do go to events, I do notice that I do really enjoy, because I'm at home all the time, sort of in my little like office area,
Mhm.
like working on things. I do enjoy going to events because then I get to see my friends, and we get to talk about what's going on in the industry, and what we're working on, and we're all trying to champion each other. So that I think is like the strongest thing, is that if you go and do these events, you get to meet people that are doing really, really awesome stuff, and you're not just sort of alone in your office looking at things that you've made for the last like 5 days.
Yeah, no, it's true, and like a lot of people, um, they think that being an artist means like that you just keep to yourself, and
Yeah.
and if that's what you want to do, you can totally do it. But I think a very important aspect is still to remember that the people you want to connect with through your art want to connect with you as a person too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, and I one of my really good friends, Danielle Boyne, who I respect and admire for her work and everything, like, I went up to her at an event that we did maybe a year and a half ago, and I just introduced myself. And I just said, I really like your work. Your work's amazing, but I just wanted to say hi. And she was across from me at a table, and from there we connected, and we got to know each other, and we've been on this parallel journey in art together, and it's to the point now where we shared a booth together at Designer Con, and we shared a booth at Long Beach Comic Con, and you just sort of you meet people who I think have the same values as you, and who value art as much as you do, and I think that's extremely valuable too.
For sure. And I've mentioned this a lot in past episodes, but those connections that you make with other artists in particular are so invaluable to your development because they provide support that your regular friends, just as much as they love you, they can't provide, because
Yeah.
these artist friends, they know your struggles, and um sometimes they're more experienced than you and they can offer advice that you just would not otherwise get. So, yeah, I think that having friends like Danielle is to use so important.
Oh yeah, yeah, completely invaluable.
And so, speaking of events like Designer Con, I know that a lot of people that do art are interested in, kind of tabling and doing stuff like that. Do you have any tips for people that might save them a little bit of frustration?
Oh yeah, oh gosh, I've learned so much. Let me think. You mean as far as setting up for the event, or like
It
applying
can
to the
be
event?
any tip at all involving just participating in an event. It can be any
Yeah.
tip that you feel like maybe you wish you had heard when you were starting.
Yeah. Okay. So my biggest thing now for events is I actually like to pack a day before the loading day.
Ooh, that's a
Um,
good one.
and that has helped me immensely this year, because I tend to, you think you have a lot of time before the load in. And so you're like, okay, well, I have a couple hours. It'll be fine. I'll just pack that day. but no, it's it's just some at one point or another you're gonna forget something, whether that's blue tape or scissors or whatever. It's just so much easier if you pack the day before load in. That way you can double triple check everything, especially if you're traveling like an hour and a half
Oof.
for the event. That has just been like the best thing ever for me to do. And then that way, the day of load in, all you're doing is sort of relaxing before the madness begins.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's probably my biggest thing. The other thing is I like to keep like a Google Doc sheet of all the things I'm going to be bringing with me, and like that includes like inventory and like display down to the details of I need like this roll of blue tape and or like two rolls of blue tape and like a pair of scissors and things like that. And then I'll just recycle that list and like copy it on an Excel spreadsheet, or like
Mm-hmm.
Pages or something. That way I'll have different versions of it depending on what show I'm doing,
Oh,
so
smart.
that I know like what display I'll be doing depending on like the size of the show. So if I'm just tabling, I'll have, these supplies. If I have a 10 by 10 booth, I'll have these. Um, so that's helped me as well. And I started that this year too.
Oh, those are very helpful tips for people starting out, because I feel like whenever people are doing those events for the first time, like that first time is crazy.
Oh, it's so hard. And I also, the first time I did it, I brought too much stuff. I would say to just bring, I would say you don't even have to bring that many items
Mhm.
when you go, especially the amount of inventory. I mean, again, it depends on what show you're doing, but from my experience, I started out, I bought a crap ton of prints for like for the event, and it turns out not that many people wanted to buy prints. Everyone wanted other
Mm,
things.
gotcha.
So I would say, um, you can. In my experience, it has been better to sell out and then come back the next day and bring more stuff, um, than have way too much stuff and then have to lug everything back after the event.
Oof, that is so true.
Yeah.
And I guess related to that, then how do you choose what comes with you?
Yeah, so I will pick different items based on their popularity online. So if it's extremely popular, then I'll bring more of that item.
Mhm.
If it's a new item, then I'll probably just bring like a limited amount. So sometimes, like I said previously, as I've brought, I used to bring, like 20 to 30 of each print, and I have a ton of different prints, and that was way too much. And with the backing cards and everything, it was just way too heavy. So now, because I have so many designs, I'll bring, maybe depending on the show, 15 to 20 of each design sometimes a little more. If they're smaller prints, which is generally, I think, in my experience, what people have purchased.
Mhm.
And then I'll also, and this, I guess this is another tip, but I also made it easier on the display. So with my pins, like I'll just display the pins on like a board, and then people will like ask me and to see pins afterwards if they want to purchase one, instead of putting everything out on the table, because you never know sometimes if people will like snag them from the table or something
Yeah,
like that.
and not only snagging, but like taking up so much room.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because sometimes you just have like a 4 foot table,
Mhm.
uh, and you don't have very much space, and so adding sort of different levels of display to that also help as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a great idea, especially like you said, for those like smaller spaces.
Oh, for sure.
And, I was looking at through your stuff and, well, first off, I just want to tell you I love your like mermaid lagoon.
Thank you.
Oh
Thank you.
my god, that piece is so cute. So, something I kind of like to ask is, um, you must create so much art, so much more than actually gets produced into, products and stuff. So, how do you kind of choose what becomes a print or what becomes something else, or do you pretty much put out everything that you create?
No, so I have a whole log of, or like a folder of things, both on Procreate and on my computer, of ideas that I've had, but never got to where I was happy with them. Um, I would say generally, if I'm 100% happy with how it came out, then I'll put it out. And I'll sometimes, for the most part, I've sort of gotten to a point where I understand like what my audience might want to purchase or how they might want to see it. And so,
Mhm.
like sometimes I'll just do a limited release of something, and then I'll put it like on a 5x7 print, and they're really happy with that. Um, with pins and keychains and such, it's a little harder. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'll wait until it's like I have a convention coming up, and that's when I'll put it out because it's something different. Sometimes when you go to conventions, like people want to see something other than a print.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
and because sometimes people will say, like, I don't really have anywhere to put this up, but I always carry around like my keys, so I'll buy a keychain from you in that same design. Um, so sometimes that'll happen. Like people love vinyl stickers.
Yes.
And so there's definitely that as well. And I think what's great with that too is, and I think I saw like Catnip Illustrations talk about this like in a vlog or something, but about how like sort of diversifying the price points
Mhm.
helps a lot. And so that's kind of how I decide. Like it's either, is there a show coming up where I can, sell this and then sell it on my shop afterwards. And also trying to see like what the response is like to the art and if people are interested in seeing it in other things. Sometimes that helps as well. So sometimes I'll poll my audience and ask them if they want to see the design or art that I've created on other things.
Yeah, and actually, you kind of ran past a really good tip, which is the diversifying your price points. Like, I feel like that's a tip I don't really hear a lot. It kind of just punched me in the face right now. I was like, oh my god, that's like that's actually so smart because if you can provide things that, like different tiers, like things that are like in the $1 to $5 range and things are in
Mhm,
the 10 to 20 and 20 and up,
mhm,
you'll most likely be able to catch someone buying stuff because sometimes certain people don't want to or they can't spend that much, but they still want to
mhm,
own something of yours. And
mhm.
then you'll also have those diehards that want to have like an original.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've learned too as I've started selling at conventions and even online sometimes is, you know, sometimes I'll have the vinyl stickers for sure is one thing that I've learned my audience specifically really resonates with because I've spoken with other artists too who have said, how do stickers do? Because stickers aren't really doing that well for me. And I'll think, I think in my audience specifically, it really likes the vinyl stickers because then they're not forced to put it on not just on a wall.
Yeah.
Like they can put it on water bottles and other things like that. And so having that sort of range of prices helps, especially in a convention setting, because sometimes, your audience is coming and they're especially me, like I have some of my audiences still like in high school, sometimes they're in college and they really can't spend that much money. But I also have an audience that's, you know, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and above who are open to spending, more money to own some of the art that I have. And so, sometimes I'll have buttons and they'll be like $3 for like a pack or I'll have pins which are like $10 and prints that range from like 10 to 25. So it really helps, I think, to get your art out there for sure.
Yeah, totally. It's such a smart business move for sure. And so I guess since we're kind of nearing the end, I have a couple of easier fun questions.
Yeah, sure.
So one that I really like asking everybody is, especially you love color. We all know you love color. But is there either a color palette or just a single color that, although you love it, you don't really get to use that much?
Oh my gosh, that is a really good question. A color palette. Oh my gosh, this is so hard because I use so many colors.
I know. It's so funny. Sometimes my fun questions end up being the tough ones.
I mean, I would say I don't use a lot of red in my palette, like just straight up red.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
I red and blacks. And I really love when artists that I admire just strictly use red and blacks in their paintings
Yeah.
because they come out extremely bold, but they're not, in my color palette's all pastel and like periwinkle and like light pink and things and colors like that. So sometimes I'll see that and I'll be like, oh man, I love those color combinations, but that doesn't really fit my style. So
I
maybe I'll
know.
just like playfully do it at some point and like post it. But yeah, so I guess yeah, red and black probably are
Yeah,
like my two.
that's fun. I
Yeah.
think that's the first time I got those here on the show. So that's awesome. And then do you have any final advice or words to share for both young and old artists alike who really want to kind of pursue art more in their lives, but they haven't yet?
I would say that the fear is natural because ignoring that fear is not,
Easier said than
it's
done.
easier said than done. Like I know a lot of people will say, don't be scared, just do it. It's so much easier said than done. But I think acknowledging that and working to it a little bit every day will really, really help build your confidence. So even if that's, 5 or 10 minutes a day, drawing something that you really enjoy or posting it and just putting it out there, it really helps keep you accountable and even shows you over time, like what your growth looks like.
Mhm.
So, my biggest advice would be sort of what I said earlier in the interview, which is just keep making things and try not to think about it too much. I think when I started, I put a lot of pressure on myself to be as productive as possible because I wanted to make a living out of it. And I feel like that sometimes doesn't help when you're just trying to put your creativity out there. Um, and I think, I will also say, like, listen to podcasts like this one or like the Creative Pep Talk, which I've listened to a
I
lot,
love that
where
one.
I love that one, where, I feel like he does a really good mix of practical and creative.
Mhm.
And it's good to understand, from the practical side how to be a working artist. But I think if you just want to put your art out there and be more creative in your life, I think if you put yourself into the art that you make, that hopefully and eventually, whether it's popular with the masses or not, like if it's something you're proud of, then I think that's really what in the end what we're looking for.
That's so true. Thank you so much for sharing that with everyone. And for those out there who have not yet witnessed your beautifully cute, colorful art, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram. So on Instagram.com/Cheery Human Studios. And you can also find me on cherryhumanstudios.com. But I mostly post on both of those things. And I also have a Patreon. So it's patreon.com, Cheery Human Studios as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving us your time during this busy holiday season. I know that you definitely must have so much work to do. So I totally appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Alex. This was so much fun. Thank you.
Oh man, talking to her was so uplifting, and actually listening back to this episode this week when I was editing really did kind of give me a boost that I very much needed recently. But how about we point out a couple of the key lessons you can take away from her journey? Number 1, don't feel like you're trapped in your current job, you know? So she was working for a very corporate sort of techie setting, you know, the kind of graphic design that's very sleek and it's all blue and clean. And she got to a point where she was like, you know what, this kind of work is not fulfilling me enough and I want to try my own thing. So there's no reason why you can't do that too. And the other good thing is that a lot of your skills will transfer. Even if you're not doing whatever your craft is as your day job, whatever your day job skills are, they will translate into whatever new job you want. I promise. Number 2, and I super agree with this one. If you can, do an internship. If you're going to art school and they say, hey, you can do an internship if you want, like, if it's not mandatory, do it anyways. Doing internships can create so many good opportunities and relationships and connections that you would not have otherwise, because these are people who expect you to come in and learn and make mistakes and learn in, a professional environment, and they will see you grow and they will be able to vouch for you and your work. So, yes, if you have the opportunity to do an internship, please go for it. And number 3, Kristina talked about how when she first started doing tabling at shows and stuff, she didn't know what she was doing, but she just kind of figured it out as she went along. And you know what? Yeah, don't be afraid to not know it all before you do it. I think the best lesson and the best way to learn is through doing. So you want a table at a convention, but you don't know how? Sign up for one and figure it out anyways. There's plenty of resources there's plenty of resources online for you to check out. And even with all the tips and tricks in the world, you're still gonna find out there are things you wish you had known and things that you would not have known had you not done these things. So please, whatever it is you want to do, even if you're afraid because you don't have it all figured out, don't worry about it. You will figure it out as you go along and you'll get better. And you're just gonna be that person that everyone's gonna be like, wow, can you give me tips and tricks? Because you're gonna know them all. You know why? Because you have to figure it out. And honestly, that's such a good way to learn. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening to me. And thank you so much for sticking with me. I promise, guys, I'm not going anywhere. But, just like you, I have my own insecurities as an artist and I go through funks. And it's just really nice to see you guys coming back week after week. And I do see you guys through the podcast stats, and it really means the world to me. So thank you. And if you really like the show, there's a couple ways you could help me. I know you're out there listening. But yeah, please leave me a review on any app you're using to listen to me right now, but particularly Apple Podcasts if you're using that. It helps the show get found, and it helps me spread the word and lessons to more artists out there, as well as leaving a couple stars, 5 stars actually, and subscribing. Please subscribe to the podcast so that you can get the episodes delivered to you automatically week after week. And what else? If you want to follow the podcast, why don't you go on Instagram right now, type in the Art Journey Pod, and click follow. And if you want to see all the show notes, all wrapped up in one easy, accessible place, you can head over to the website, theartjourneypodcast.com. And I know that this outro is becoming really long, but if you want to see my work and you're curious about what I do, I designed the podcast art, but I also do a lot of watercolor portraiture. So you can check me out on Instagram at AlexAgosto. That's Alex Agosto. And I also have a website, alexagosto.com, which I just recently opened up some commissions. So if you want a cute watercolor portrait of your pet, check me out. Anyways, guys, thank you again so much for listening to me, and I hope you really had fun today. But until next time, I will see you later. Bye.